I think this is going to be the most right-wing Israeli government for a long time. And I mean, Netanyahu and Lieberman seem to me to have slightly different positions, but Netanyahu, as the Prime Minister, doesn't seem particularly committed to any sort of peace process. So I think this is going to make the situation a lot more difficult to try and resolve anything. And I think that for those people, those of us in the outside world who have a strong view on Israel, I think we're going to have to accept that this is going to be an even more intransigent Israeli government. The one irony of that is sometimes it is the more right-wing governments that are in a position, strangely, to be pushed towards peace. I mean, it's, for instance, in Israeli history, it tends to be military leaders who you would never expect to be peacemakers, who sometimes, because of their military background, can push for peace without losing credibility within the electorate in a way that non-military leaders are unable to. But my own view is that there is going to have to be far more pressure from the outside world on this new Israeli government. And I think that has a message in it for activists and campaigners. And I think the crucial thing about that becomes, if one looks, for instance, at the South African history, are there not other important strategies that need to be engaged? And I know in Spain, people have been calling for economic boycotts of Israel. And I think that this becomes a very important strategy at this point in the Middle East. And I think particularly targeted towards companies who are responsible for the production of arms and weapons and companies who support them. So both Israeli companies, but also those international companies who continue to support them and continue to support those people who favor continued warfare over the creation of a just peace in Palestine.
Mm-hmm. And finally, what do you think the Spanish people, the Spanish government can do for helping that process?
I think there are two levels. I think at a governmental level that the people of Spain need to be putting pressure on their government to be pushing the American government to take a harder line on Israel. Because it is only through pressure from people perceived as supportive of the United States and the Obama administration to keep up the message that the situation in the Middle East is unacceptable, that there has to be resolution of the Palestinian question. So I think that has to be the role of government, and obviously as a government in its own right in Spain, but also as part of the EU. I think that becomes extremely important. The second dimension is I'm a great believer in the power of ordinary people, not necessarily to work through their governments, but as activists and as campaigners, to exert pressure in their own right. And in the world that we live in, the most important way that one can do that is through spreading information about what is going on in Palestine and about how it could be different on the one hand, but on the second hand, looking at measures like economic boycotts. This was incredibly successful in the struggle against apartheid. To my mind, it was one of the most crucial aspects in bringing an end to apartheid, was financial sanctions against South Africa. And I think that in Spain, I think that people need to be looking at targeting very specific companies, either Israeli companies or companies that support Israel, and allow them to continue in the way that they're going without impact on their economy. Because at the moment, the Israeli economy is an economy that actually thrives on warfare. Most economies require peace and stability to prosper. But in Israel, over the last decade or so, the economy has actually thrived on conflict and on war. And I think the only way you break that cycle is by attempting to undermine the economic basis of it. So I think what is important for people in Spain is, as I say, on the one hand, to continue to circulate information, to continue to show solidarity, and on the other hand, look at targeted economic measures to attempt to negatively impact on Israel.